Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, listeners. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show this evening. You're listening to Dark Matters Radio with the Sorceress Cagliastro, Blood Sorceress, Necromancer in the Hands of Nine, and my extraordinary on-air team, my co-host, Chris Rogostrowski. How are you tonight, Chris?
Hi, everyone. Oh, not bad. How are you doing, Sorceress?
Good, thank you. And our producer and science officer, Morgan St. Knight. Good evening, Morgan.
Good evening, Sorceress. It's a pleasure as always.
Thank you. And Victor the Voice Furman, one of the smartest, most compassionate human beings I know. And I am so grateful for your time, Victor. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I don't know about smartest. Compassionate, yeah, but the smart.
See, you're so smart, you knew how to take that and make it into something we all laughed about. That's smart.
Thanks.
Tonight we're talking about protection, and we started talking about protection for an hour last week, and it was a really good intro. We have more science on the subject this evening and all manner of things. But I want to say a bit about protection, and this week I had an opportunity to start the process of spending a half hour on Skype with each one of my students, and I'm not done with that yet, but that's the process that's going on this week. And a number of them said things about last week's show and about protection and what they thought that was. And it's always very interesting to hear the people that you're sharing your knowledge with come back with feedback about what they think the work is and how to use the work and this sort of thing. And many of them talked about protection as sort of a preemptive strike, which I thought was interesting. When we think about protection, we usually think about a reflex. Something is happening, and we have to, therefore, say, well, let me react to this. Let me say I'm concerned. Let me say there's a danger. Let me say something is entering my sphere, and in this moment I'm feeling discomfort and want to throw a wall up of some kind and protect myself. But as one talks to students of sorcery who are very involved in the lifestyle of this kind of work and being in the work 24/7, a new thread came through, and everyone was talking about how to keep protection in place. So we have a lot to talk about tonight, and I think that there are some techniques that I want to talk about. I want to talk about how to put protection in place so that it responds as an entity in and of itself and reacts, and we'll talk about that. And I want to talk about how we use our blood as a protective device, our own internal shield, if you will. These are important things that we haven't had a chance to talk about before. And tonight at some point, probably just after the first hour, I will be doing some on-air sorcery, sending energy that can be used by others as a protective device. I suggest that if you are available to have a mirror with you tonight, to have a mirror with you. You don't absolutely need to have a mirror to accept this energy, but I'm suggesting that you do, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that is later and how it is that I want to send that particular energy. The other two times that I did these things on the air, the information that I got back was quite potent. People were feeling things. People were having experiences that they're still using. And the most interesting thing to me is that in archive, when people are listening to the show, they're having those same kind of experiences. So at the end of the day, one of the things that I love about radio, that it is proof of the power of words. It is proof of the power of the sounds that we make, the utterances that we allow ourselves to let go into this world, and what people feel and experience when we give this information out. So if protection is what we're discussing, then maybe the very essence of talking about these materials live and on the air in this way, and writing about them and teaching them and participating in them, is protection in and of itself. Because when one is allowing themselves to be open and free and discuss these sorts of techniques and skills, then what's really happening is a larger concept of protection is in existence. Because when people are educated on how to take care of themselves and how to move energy, on how to keep their world safe, then we are doing protection sorcery in the very, very activity just of teaching and talking about it. So throwing that out there, and we have a lot to talk about tonight, I'm just curious, for some reason, Victor, I want to talk to you tonight. Not that I don't always want to talk to you, of course, but I feel like there's a lot you can add when it comes to protection. Where is this subject for you? What is your experience?
Well, it's really interesting because I have found, and I don't recommend this for everyone unless you have a very strong foundation in this, but I've used compassion as protection. I've been in a number of situations where people have been unstable and ranting and raving, and rather than what some might do, walk away, some might yell and scream back, I just allow myself to listen without absorbing anything during the course of the rant, and when the rant is over, in an act of compassion, I will walk over to that person and embrace them. And the emotional healing that takes place when you do that is just unbelievable. It actually can change people's lives, and I've had that happen twice. That it's significantly affected people, and multiple times that it's diffused rather bad situations.
Victor, you're the kind of person who can tame a lion, and I don't mean that even in terms of the technique that you have, but you have this sense about you that this is now going to be a peaceful place. And that I think that what you're saying is so wonderful and such an interesting and new way to look at protection. You use what you have, which is this sense of compassion, this sense of a peaceful, even playing field. And I don't mean that in any way as a submissive sort of side to the thing. You know, it's always important to me to mention that we're not talking about that sort of new agey kind of thing. We're talking about a genuine, in-your-face kind of emotion, and you bring compassion in that way. And in these situations, you know, you're a person who can walk into the lion's den, and they will take a moment to respect you. There's something about you that commands that, and not even in an aggressive way. What was the long-term feedback from these experiences? Was there any?
Life-changing. One person absolutely turned their life around. They were actually on the verge of they were seriously contemplating suicide, and it turned that around completely. And for the other person, it helped them to realize that their anger was and they were able to turn that around also. Anger
is a very interesting thing when it comes to protection. Someone today sent me a quick text saying, you know, this person from years ago is now starting rumors again about me and all this kind of business. And I asked a question. I said, how did you find out about the rumors? And he said, well, you know, I looked at his Facebook page, and I looked at this, and I looked at that. And I said, so had you not gone out to search this information, you would not have encountered this information. And he said no, and we both sort of laughed about it. And I said, you know, we're going to talk about protection tonight, and one of the things we talk about protection is protecting oneself against their own habits.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that I'm thinking about when it comes to what you were talking about. So what you were able to do is turn someone into their own mirror and look at what they were doing to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when it comes to protection, I always want to broaden the gaze. I always want to tell people that this is not about someone calling me and saying, you know, hey, there's somebody I don't like and they're doing something. Can you put a bubble around me? And I know I say it all the time, but I feel like it is a requirement for me to remind people who are doing protection sorcery of any kind that be very careful what you're protecting yourself in, what the encasement is, what is the zone in which you're protecting yourself, because you have to take inventory of what's in there already. You know, I use the example over and over about be careful if you've protected yourself in a house, there might be a lion in there with you. But there also might be your habits. Protection on occasion equals isolation. And I want to talk about that a little bit because all of us have clients, we have people who come to us and say, oh, you really have to protect me from this, protect me from this. Just shut it down, make sure that nobody can get to me. I will never do that kind of work. When someone comes to me for protection, I work on the other guy. I work on the force that's coming towards them. I very rarely will be willing to isolate someone. They would have to be in such danger from so many different areas before I would isolate them, because an isolated person is just as vulnerable as a person who's wide open. Morgan, you have clients that come to you for protection. You want to talk about that?
Sure. A lot of times people will come to me for protection, and they're always convinced, that they know exactly what's going on with the people involved. They're convinced they know who's attacking them. They're convinced they know what's going on in terms of exactly how the attack is coming out. And really, a lot of times I just, before they say anything to me, what I do is I take them, I sit them down, and I do what I call a cold reading on them. Now, this is not the sideshow psychic sort of cold reading that you hear about. This is me just getting a general sense of what's going on. And I'll write it down on a piece of paper. I'll do this in their presence. And then I will put the piece of paper over to the side of the table we're working at so that they can see I'm not touching it, not, mucking around with it, and not going back and changing the notes. And then I have them tell me what's going on. And then after they tell me what's going on, I have them look at the paper, and we see exactly where the correspondences are. And then we figure out that a lot of times they've missed the mark. The symptoms are exactly as they've described it. I get a sense of what's going on with them, but it may be just an unfortunate energy that they've entangled themselves with, and that comes from, it can just come from daily living. Sometimes that's part of an issue with daily living. We run into unfortunate energy. And other times it is an entity. It may not be a very evolved entity in terms of organization, but it's something that definitely wants to feed off somebody. And we go from there. But most of the time, people want me to attack someone else, or they want protection from a specific person. And I tell them, no, I will not protect you from a specific person. I will give you the tools you need to do to protect yourself. I'm all about client involvement. They have to be involved with the process from beginning to end. I don't, unless it's an extreme situation, I don't do things exactly for them. I will go ahead and lead them through it, but they have to participate every step of the way.
I think, Morgan, that is one of the differences between our work, although I do have many clients that I insist that they become involved because it is the right choice. Does anybody else hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my computer was briefly re-echoing. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, but I do a lot of what I call sort of blind work, where someone is in trouble, or so. It doesn't even have to be protection. I do a lot of these kinds of things where I just fix it. And I think that this happens because in some cases, in many cases, by the time people get to me, they've been to a lot of other people. They've been down the road, as you say, they're sort of the roadside psychic kind of thing. And that's unfortunate because they've wasted a lot of time and probably a lot of money. But I often do cases where people are just desperate and it needs to be fixed. I also deal with children on occasion, so in that sense, they are not able to participate. But having a client participate when they can is absolutely a wonderful assistance, if you will, because energy is energy, and if everybody's facing the same way, you can all see in that direction. And if you think about people joining in the work that way, then that's okay. But sometimes you get a client who has another path or a different thing that they do, and they're like someone with just a little bit too much knowledge, and it can get in the way. I mean, have you experienced that? I don't know if Morgan can hear me.
Oh, yes, I can. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I do experience that sometimes. I'm not really in a position where I deal with a lot of children, but like you said, very often I can get in the way of the, don't know what that was. Very often the client can get in the way of the energy that you're trying to do and the work you're trying to do. It's so much easier for me if they just stay out of it for the beginning, and then we can work on it and we can isolate what's going on with them, and then I want them to participate. But a lot of times they elide over details because they're so sure they know what's going on and how it's going on that it really is very difficult for me to figure out precisely what's going on.
You know, within this work, those of us that work it together, and I want to talk to Chris for a minute, we are very, I don't know that we're a close group, but we are close energy-wise. And we are here for each other in a very profound way. When I was going through some residual effects from the exorcism that I had done, this group of people was tremendous. I mean, all the three of you checking in, making sure I was okay, and my master student who was literally taking the pain away from me and putting it somewhere else, and we'll deal with it later. He was amazing. And Chris has a sense of having my back. He's got an intuition for me, which is extraordinary. And I'll get a text and it'll be, you know, what's going on? I'm feeling you. So, you know, Chris, you have a real profound intuition when it comes to someone who is in need of protection. And thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, that's no problem. It just happens, I don't know how it started, but somebody, if I come in contact with somebody, for some reason, from that point, I get a feeling about that person. It's like I can tap into what they're feeling if I really think about it. And the more I'm exposed to somebody, the more it grows, and the more it becomes something that's second nature. It's like I don't even have to think about it. It'll just pop into my head that something's going on. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I don't know where it came from. It started one day. Wasn't my first wife. It was the person I was seeing after that. It was like I could just read that person all the time. And the real bad problem with it is once I get to know somebody and I get to recognize their energy, I can tell what their emotions are, which is fine. But I can also tell when they're lying to me, because it changes. And I know they make TV shows about this dumb shit all the time, but it's not the way it shows up on television.
Really, tell us how you feel, Chris. Go ahead, tell us.
You know, you just know that. It's like you can hear or you can feel a change in their voice. You can feel that their energy changes. It's like it's just everything's fine, and then as soon as they start, you can tell. And, you know, how do you call somebody out on that? You know, it's when I was working and I had one of my employees lie to me. You know, how do I look at them and say, I know you're lying to me? You know, I don't have any proof, or, oh, yeah, I can feel it. Yeah, okay, I'd be the next one out the damn door. You know.
But for you, Chris, I think that detection is protection. You have this sense that you know when somebody is not okay. We had a student join us who turned out to be a fraud and a jackass. And the reason that I let him join us for a week was because he had spent almost a year on and off asking. And sometimes I just allow something to prove itself out to be inappropriate. And that's what I chose to do. But, Chris, you smelled that from 1,000 miles away. Actually, you smelled it from 4,500 miles away, to be perfectly honest. And you said to me, you sent me a very clear text, what's up with this guy, and his name. And I knew where we were. So for you, you have a very intense ability to detect what's coming. Sometimes protection is preemptive in that way. And sometimes we don't necessarily feel it coming to ourselves. Now, I've been doing this for decades. This is all that I do. This is the work that I do. And there are times when I have a sense that I should be paying more attention to what's coming towards me. I have an enormous plate of responsibility of other people. I have a lot of clients. I have a lot of people who are in various states of unwellness who I am helping and keeping going. So sometimes I am beyond spread thin. And if it wasn't for the actual feedback of the energy of sorcery itself, then I would not be, let's just say, refilled in the way that I am. And I think that, Victor, you experience some of that. You experience, juggling 10 plates when it comes to protection and wellness and all this sort of thing.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we talked about, we used the word maturity or maturing in energy a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that I've learned is that I have to take some time for me to recharge. If I don't do that, then I'm not good to anyone.
Well, I think that's something that we all eventually have to learn to do, because what happens is the energy feeds back into us and gives us, I think, sort of a review of energy. It gives us a renewal. But I want to remember that this show is about protection, and one of the things that we need to do is protect ourselves in the expenditure of energy.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to talk about, in this area. I want to talk about that kind of thing. I want to talk about the expending of energy and how we protect ourselves when doing that. And the best way I can talk about that is to discuss the honing of one's blood as a protective shield. And blood sorcery is what I do. It is my main focus in my work. And whether I'm doing it for necromancy or for demon work or whatever I'm doing it for, it still really is the baseline, the main thread of what I do. So I review and spend time with my blood. I remind myself that it is my detector. In the same way that when one is feeling unwell, when one is feeling interrupted, whether one is sick or has a sense of stress or urgency or nerves, if you will, your blood is doing all sorts of things. It's utilizing its chemistry to give you warning signs. Because all activity is just the movement of energy, as a blood sorceress, I can take that exact same phenomenon and hone it to be able to see when there is quote-unquote danger coming, or inappropriateness coming, or something coming that doesn't feel right. So I actually get this sense of like a heat flush now. And this is something I've worked on for years. And in the last maybe 5 years, I think I have it down to about as sharp as it could possibly get. When I feel something is coming, I get this very particular sense of heat in certain areas of my body telling me that this is now on the horizon. So I've actually developed an internal physical mechanism as a detector for when protection is necessary. And then when that happens, my first defense is the energy that my blood pushes out. I can create a situation where I am in a sort of an automatic iron ring. And those of you who study my work know what that means. So my protection shield can go up in the deepest sleep in that sense. Who wants to talk about their own sense of protection? Because I think when we talk about the practitioner first. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
When I guess it started when I was in the service, you get it hammered into you in boot camp mainly that you sleep with one eye open. And I think because we are what we are, that it carries over into, I don't think it's necessarily my subconscious, but it's my energy itself just stays alert, that there's something, and I do have a cheat. I mean, I have somebody that looks over me while I'm, so I don't end up doing dumb shit to my own self. But other than that, I think that my energy itself doesn't go to sleep. It goes more or less on standby. That there's a constant field around me, that I put that there so long ago that it stays. It don't go away.
Well, I wouldn't call what looks over you as a cheat. I would call it something you have earned through a real commitment to the work.
Well, like I said, everybody else, it's not something everybody else has.
I think it is in this group.
Well, yeah. But I think...
Go ahead.
The whole thing with, like I said, my energy being like that and being able to detect when something is wrong, I think that helps with my protection because I'm on an edge like that. I had a doctor one time. I went in, my blood pressure was high, and he says about that my body, for some reason, is in constant fight or flight mode. Well, it's like, well, yeah, of course it is. That's the way I am. That's where my energy level is at all time. It stays like that because of the fact I can read things around me. That's how I know if something's wrong. Well, if I don't sense something wrong, I don't know it's there. And
so
I think that
you're like this all the time. You're on all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it don't go away. It just, and I think that's something that I honed it that way, and it's to the point that I turned it on and I can't shut it off. And
I think
that has a lot to
do. That has a lot to do with the relationship that you and I have. We have this sort of 24/7 kind of thing that goes on, and there is not any boundary really in terms of checking in with each other. And you had said something. You sent a text to me the other day, or we were talking somewhere where you said, that there's not a lot of people like this. That wasn't exactly the language, but that was a more private thing. But we were talking about this being in a constant state of awareness, this constant state of alert. Victor, are you in a constant state of alert? And you work in a very intense and powerful energy industry. Does that affect you? Are you in a constant state of alert?
Very interesting. In my day-to-day work, I don't even think about it consciously, because my knowledge and what I bring to my customers that's my defense. It's really not a defense per se. It's just that I bring years of assurance, years of experience, and that's my day job. So forget it. Forget that. Let's put that on the side. In terms of the energy work, though, and the work with the disincarnate, a long time ago in my early training, I learned about raising my own defensive shield. And it's gotten to the point now that when I go into any energy work, anything that involves healing the disincarnate, any type of necromancy, any type of work with other people's energy, it's automatic. I don't even have to think about it. It's there. It's on. So it's not on 24/7, but it's on when it's necessary.
Mark, what about you?
Well, for me, I also have a pretty highly honed sense of when something's wrong, and that's something that I've had ever since I was a child. I could tell when people were lying to me. I could tell when something was wrong. But gradually, as I developed a relationship with some protective entities, they step in too. And often I will have a sense that something is wrong, and then all of a sudden I will feel one of those entities in particular grab me on the back of the neck. That's his sign that get out, there's something wrong, there's danger here, you better do something to avoid whatever the situation is that you're about to step into, stop doing what you're doing and change course. And that's always a great help. But I don't like to rely on other entities, even though I'm very grateful for their help, because ultimately it's down to me. So I do have that sense, and 24/7 I sleep fairly lightly, and of course living here in Atlanta, I have to be on my guard all the time anyway because of the crazy drivers who are out here. I live on the second floor, and I still have to look both ways before I go to my own bathroom because I'm afraid one of them's going to run me over somehow. But so we do have a little, down here in the South, we do have a little extra impetus to just watch our backs. I have woken up a lot of times and known that something bad is about to happen. So I am not really clear whether that's my own instinct kicking in, whether that's one of my protected entities who's waking me up, tapping me on the shoulder and say, look out. But more than once I've been able to do something in the immediate few moments after waking up, and I felt that that has avoided a direct hit, what I call a direct hit from some harmful energy, whether intentionally directed at me by some other person or entity, or whether it was just some harmful energy that happened to me moving through. I do feel that I've been able to avoid those. So I guess it is somewhat of a 24/7 thing with me.
I think that we all have some sort of external protective energy. I mean, I have my attending demons and a small group of disincarnate who are with me all the time, who are always observing and sort of taking care of my all that goes on around me, because there's so much going on all the time. So I think that, like Chris had mentioned, he has someone who, or I think your term was something that watches over you. But I think that we all have that. Morgan, you have a question in the chat room. I actually have to step away from the phone for one moment. You guys want to take that? I'll jump back in a minute.
Okay, yeah. The question is from Nico, and the question was regarding our earlier conversation about isolation. What do you do when it's someone you don't want to have in your environment at all anymore? And I think the answer for me in that case would be not to isolate yourself, because then you're isolating yourself from your strengths, from your allies, and you may, as the sorceress mentioned earlier, if you're trying to isolate yourself, you end up putting a barrier around it. And if there's any negative energy, or I should say harmful energy, I hate giving negative because that's an actual term in physics, and there's nothing wrong with negative energy per se, but harmful energy from that person still there, then you're essentially trapping yourself in that protective circle with that energy. It's better to isolate them and to put a barrier around them so they can no longer interact with you. And if you can do that, then you will find that their influence over you is greatly diminished and probably will go away faster than you want to, or faster than you would think. So, Chris and Victor, what would you do in this case if there's someone that you want to get out of your environment entirely?
Well, the first thing
I don't give them any energy at all. I don't pay any attention to them.
You don't have any energy at all for what?
No, the question was if there's someone in your environment that you want to get rid of, you don't have anything to do with anymore. And my response is I give them no attention, period. I cut off all energy, all attention, all consciousness.
So that's very much like what you were saying, fixing with compassion.
Yeah. It would be the inverse of that. It would be giving them nothing.
Right. Sure, but it's still a decision of clarity that you make. Chris, what were you saying?
I wouldn't cut them off entirely just so I know what the hell they're doing. But I would make sure, the first thing I would do is put a barrier between us. I wouldn't isolate myself per se, that I would lock myself in more or less in a room with the tiger, but I would put up a fence, something that I can see through but you can't get in.
So when you do that, Chris, what's the mechanism? What do you use?
Generally, now this is going to sound real simple, but I have a set of bind runes that I use, and I generally just use them. I have a ritual that I go through with them, and I basically use the energy in them to make a separation between the two of us. Now, that doesn't isolate each one of us. It just puts a separation. That way I can do my work. I can maneuver. I can do what I need to do so that I'm not totally isolated from what I need to get my energy and everything else that I need to combat the situation. Now, as it progresses, I will start putting more on top of them to make them more isolated from everything. I will isolate them from the things that they need. Family, food, clothing, shelter. You look at what the essentials are and the severity of what they are doing, and as it is needed, you start taking things away from them. You slowly start closing that fence around them, and you start, it goes from a chain link into a full barricade, and you just encircle them with it.
This is very interesting because your method is very different from Victor's. Morgan, what do you do? Did I miss that part? Morgan?
No, actually, I didn't give specifics. I said isolate the other person. What would be the thing to do? I don't want to. I don't. But I recently performed a ritual a few months ago, and this was to dismiss a person in my life who unfortunately is a relative, and I have to have family ties with this person. That doesn't mean I have to interact with this person, and she insisted on meddling in everything I was doing. So just an example of a ritual that I do to isolate her, I took a candle and I dressed it in my own blood. This was one of the larger glass encased candles, but down here, and I know you can't get them everywhere, down here you can get the candles that you can actually remove from the tall glasses, so it makes it much easier to anoint it with the blood. And I then put that on a plate, which I circled around with ashes, and then circled around with nails and iron filings. And then I dripped my blood around that circle of ashes and iron filings so that I would have control of this person and I would be able to isolate this person. This was the symbolism for me in using my own blood. And lit that candle and let it work. And every day I added a couple drops of my blood to that candle as it was burning with the intent that this person would just leave me alone. So far it's worked. The person is out of my life, has stopped meddling, and fortunately I don't think I'll have to deal with her anymore. But that's just one example of the type of ritual I might do to isolate someone or instruct someone else to do to isolate someone in their life that they want to get rid of.
Morgan, may I ask, because this is not a practice of mine and I'd like to learn more about this. When you say you add a couple of drops of blood to the candle, are you actually adding it to the flame or to the physical body of the candle?
Well, I'm dripping it close to the flame. I don't want to extinguish the flame, but as these candles burn, the wax melts and there's a pool of liquid around the flame, so that's where I add it to. Because there's a risk that you could put the flame out, and I don't think that has too much symbolism for me anymore, but just once the wick is wet, it's a lot harder to get it relit, so I try to go around into the actual melted wax.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, the thing is that you're when you heat your blood, you're speeding up the molecules and you're increasing the energy of its output. Anything that creates dehydration in the liquid, because when you're heating up your blood, the liquid is burning off, is creating a little tiny tornado. And when the tornado is specific from your blood, you have great control over where it's going. I like what you're doing, Morgan, because you're using directional sorcery and magnetics and all this sort of thing by changing the polarity of her accessibility to you. I'm a fan of isolating the other person too. I mean, that's really the way that I work. And when I isolate someone, there are 5 or 6 rituals that I use on a regular basis. Some of them involve sigils. Some of them don't involve anything at all except the motion of my hands. I am more likely to do that. And then I use the boxes. I put people in the boxes and put them either 500 years in the future or 500 years in the past, and that's it. And they can't contact me. They can't get through that. But there's another thing that I do, which is essentially an ongoing punisher for somebody who is really obstinate and deliberate and wants to continue to have that interaction. Sometimes you can use sorcery and shut someone down with their own obstinance, their own change in experience, sort of rebirth them to their need to touch you or come near you or join you in some way. And then you also have people who have people around them who encourage them to step back in the ring. I have one person in my life like that who those around him encourage him to continue communicating with me. So I do a particular type of sorcery, very high frequency kind of thing, where I create what I refer to as a clipping, an illustration, a mental image of something about that person, and I lock it into a box. And I don't mean a box like a wooden box. I mean the boxes in the terms of the work that I do. And in that is some sort of mechanism to create a sense of terror or panic upon them when they consider approaching me. And this is a a very high frequency kind of piece of work, and it has its own internal mechanisms. So say, for example, if somebody is stalking me and I've pretty much shut them down, and I notice that there's something in their life that causes them to repeat this action, and it wants to come back. When they think of me, or when they think of approaching me, they become fearful or in pain or in some sort of mechanism that shuts them down on top of the protection sorcery. So what it does is it retrains them to do the exact opposite, to want to stay as far away from me as possible. And there are a lot of people out there floating around in those boxes. Because a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. And with energy, which is a really interesting thing. To be able to do that. I don't when I do isolation sorcery to keep somebody away from me, I don't use blood in the sense that adding it to that particular box, because the box is in a sense an ethereal thing. It floats in the air above me. It floats out there somewhere, and it is non-destructible. It is a permanent situation. But what I do is I send it off with the energy of the utilization of my blood as pushing outward, as the way that we use iron rings. And it's just one of the types of protection that I do, and I can do this for other people as well. I've done this for everything from, quote unquote bullies to people who have attempted to utilize my work or involve themselves in my family in some way, this kind of thing. And occasionally to a member of the disincarnate who's aggressive and doesn't want to stay away. So, that's something that we don't talk about that often, but it does happen. It's not the same as possession. It's kind of more like obsession. Victor, I know you have to go soon, so is there anything that you want to add?
Actually, I see my wife approaching, which means I am going to have to go, but I just wanted to say that we were talking before about energetic protection, and then you folks were also talking about physical protection. And I've had a number of instances, I believe I shared them in an earlier program, where I've been driving and have somehow steered around serious accidents without me intentionally doing the steering. So you and I will talk at one point when I can grant you, not grant you, where you can grant me the time and I have the time made available to find out about if I do have protective demons with me, and I believe that.
Well, Victor, let's set it up and let's do it.
Absolutely.
And say hello to your wife for me, will you?
I shall, and on that note, I'm going to say good night, Chris, good night, Morgan, good night, Sorceress, good night, listeners. We'll love to talk to you again and see you next week.
Good night, Victor.
Good night, Victor.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. I'm hearing a lot of noise. Is anybody else hearing a lot of noise tonight?
No, not now. It was.
Not now. I think maybe it was what was going on around his cell phone. So this idea of these sort of floating protection barges, I occasionally group people together, and it's the desert island I've put out there, and it's where all the boxes are, where people who have interacted with me or my family inappropriately, where they wind up per se. There are certainly other methods. I use sigils quite a bit, and I use sigils on mirrors quite a bit, and we'll talk about that again in a little while. Morgan, are there any questions in the chat room?
There are. You read my mind. And one question, going back to the disincarnate, where you were talking about a hostile disincarnate. One of our listeners wants to know, she says she is working, maybe it's a he, I'm sorry if I got the gender wrong, but the listener wants to know, they have been working with some of the work you did in the Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1, and is going into the cemetery after bleeding themselves, and feels that there is a spirit with them, and that they are getting very nervous about this. It's a nervous sort of feeling, having this disincarnate with them. And the listener wants to know, should they have some sort of protection in place when they're doing this work, trying to get in touch with the disincarnate?
Wow, I have a lot to say about that. First of all, if the work frightens you, then one of two things has to happen. You either have to deconstruct your fear, which is really, as I've said before, just not knowing what to do next and feeling inconvenienced, a destabilizing sensation. Know sometimes that one feels destabilized, but one's still okay. or consider whether or not this work is right for you. And I'm not saying that this work is not right for this listener. I want to be very clear about that. I'm saying I'm taking this opportunity to talk about whether or not this work is right for you. This is the kind of thing everybody says they want to do, and very few people can actually stand in the presence of it and do it. When you stand in the cemetery and you have the disincarnate rising up around you and they are looking at you and trying to touch you and talk to you and all of this is going on, this is not a calming feeling for most people. Most people do not have the preparation in their skill set or in their just in their life experience to do this kind of work. And there is not an ounce of judgment in my comment when I say that. You know, there's lots of things I'm not prepared to do. There are certain lifestyles that I'm not prepared to live in. And this one is a very particular one because this one you can't flip the switch on and off to, and that's what's different about it. If you're in the cemetery and you've been bleeding yourself, you're already involved in the work, you're already deeply involved in the work. Apparently you have some kind of commitment to understanding or growing in the understanding of the work. The rituals in the Blood Sorcery Bible 1 were quite visceral. They're more visceral than the ones in the second one. The second Blood Sorcery Bible leans more on the pillars and on the physics of the thing. So if you're in the cemetery and you're feeling nervous about this, my question, and Morgan, you might want to see if there's any feedback while we're talking about this, is define nervous. Nervous like nervous before you go on stage in an excited, happy moment and you're about to do something fantastic, or nervous like you're in danger, because what really has to happen when we deal with protection, we deal with safety, is an ability to decipher what it is that we're feeling. If we're really feeling like the pain of panic, that can either be coming from just your entry into this experience, which is a unique experience and not a common experience, or it could be coming from the fact that you've enacted a relationship with someone who's dangerous. Sometimes some of the ones that we enact relationships with that are dangerous happen to also be dead. And when that happens, they are not as simple to control because they are not bound by the boundaries and the social mores of the living. So they can do things that one cannot necessarily just put out like a cigarette. So when you go in the cemetery, what you need to do is really decipher what this nervousness is. And and I'll answer it in this way, if the nervousness is fear, if it is fear based on the fact that this might genuinely be a dangerous person, a dangerous disincarnate, then I suggest that you work hard to close that particular portal. And to close that particular portal, you have to do the one thing that you don't want to do, which is focus directly on the thing that causes nervousness or fear. You have to look right at the screen and see the scary monster. You have to look right into the eyes of that which you are feeling fear about to be able to shut down that portal. If it's not that kind of fear and it's just nervousness, then take that energy and use the chaos of that energy to broaden your gaze and allow yourself to see more than you're seeing. Open it wider. Because the wider your eyes are and the more you're seeing, the less fear you have, because you're experiencing more and you're having a moment where things are coming in and showing you that you're safe, but you're just having a new experience. Is there any further feedback, Morgan?
Yeah, actually, the listener did clarify that the nervousness they were talking about was more like going on stage to perform rather than fear or frightening. So
Great.
I think your answer was very thorough. So I think it covered all the bases.
Great. And if people have particular entities that they're having this sort of stress or nervousness about, and they want to contact me or they want to contact one of us, they should do that, because that's what we're here to do. People sometimes say, I've been living with this thing for 3 years and I've read all your books, but I didn't want to bother you. Well, that's crazy, because by the time they are quote unquote bothering me, they might be in a state of possession. So when it comes to this sense of a need for protection, do contact us. That's what we're here to do. Chris, do you have, I know that you live right by a cemetery and that this is a big part of your life. Do you have any jitters anymore, or are you just straight up and down in it?
No, it don't. It hasn't bothered me in years. I mean, long time ago, I got over my fear pretty much when I just realized that, one of these days I'm going to die anyway. So what the hell do I got to be afraid of?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I was close to death once, and I was dead one time. So it's nothing that, hasn't happened. I didn't get a T-shirt from it, but you know what I mean.
I'll get you a T-shirt if you want a T-shirt.
Yeah, it's like been there, done that. So it's not like so I don't really get excited about it. And as far as the people that are in there, which people got to remember, if you're going into a cemetery, those are people that are in there.
That's right.
It's not monsters from TV and all this other shit.
Right.
That, these are people. Now, granted, if they were assholes in life, they're going to be twice as bad in death. But
correct.
They're still people that can be dealt with.
And they might be desperate for communication.
Sure. And if you
which
go
makes it aggressive.
And you go into a place and you act like like the lamb or the scared puppy, yeah, if you got one or two in there that are alphas, they're going to come after you.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I want to talk to you about this because you live a great deal of your life around the cemetery and in the cemetery, and having been a trade embalmer and having done all of that, I understand that does change the fiber of who you are. Are you constantly drawn to the cemetery? Do you feel a need to be in it? Does it cure you in some way?
I feel a lot more peace when I'm in there. Of course, you feel peace in the cemetery, duh. But it's like it's almost like there's a barrier put up around the cemetery that people put up there. It's not the disincarnate that do it, and it's not physically there, but people in general put up this barrier that they don't want to go in there. So it's off limits, more or less, and people don't go in there regardless. And if you're in there, they respect the fact that you're in there and leave you alone. Because they don't know what you're doing, and then really they don't want to find out. They don't care. You're either visiting somebody that's family, or you're doing something, and they don't really want to know what you're doing, so they just keep on walking.
Yeah.
As long as you're not destroying anything, nobody's going to bother you. So
there's an interesting experience. I just, sorry about interrupting you. It just comes to mind. My daughter's school is across the street from a cemetery, and people use the cemetery to turn. And I find this very interesting. Sometimes I'll just drive in there and see what's happening and have the experience. But I can see that between around the whole hour of the pickup, where people are picking up their kids, it is devoid almost of visual disincarnate. They have stepped away. They don't participate in the sort of pedestrian experience that happens between, say, 2:30 and 3:30, when people are just using it as a way to turn so they can turn their cars and go the other direction. And what I do sometimes is I'll go in there much earlier. I'll drive in and sit there for a while, and I've learned to see what they're doing. And they seem to have an understanding, the disincarnate, when it gets close to 2:30, they fade away. I've watched it happen now at least half a dozen times. And then if you go in after 3:30 or 4 o'clock, you start to see them come back. So the cemetery has taken on a schedule, if you will, a strange flow, because the people who are coming in there from 2:30 to 3:30 are just the people who are using it like a racetrack to spin their cars around. So if you think that there's not a collective understanding in a cemetery, there certainly is. And in that same way, when you walk through a cemetery, if you are a person like myself, like all of us on the radio here tonight, who has that connection, they start to follow you. You start to have groups of them around you. And if you want to teach someone to do this work, and you have this ability, then you take them in with you, and you sort of give someone the sense of protection of your knowledge, of your experience. That's the best way to teach someone to be able to be comfortable around the dead. What do you think about that?
I agree. I agree 100%. And came about it because I lived, when I was a kid, I used to live at the bottom of a hill where there was a cemetery, and we would go up there. And I started going up by myself instead of with a bunch of friends, because it was weird. There was a playground right next to the cemetery.
Yeah.
So, of course, I spent all my time in the cemetery and not in the playground, but, I was that kind of kid.
Chris, you're a weirdo. I like you.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, just joking with you.
And, I was exposed to it that way, so I come about it pretty naturally. But I think other people, the only time that they are exposed to it is, number one, on TV, or number two, somebody in their family dies, so there's always a sense of sorrow around it.
Uh-huh.
Or there's something coming out of the ground that's going to come and eat you.
Right, sure. Well, then when people do this work, and we're talking about protection tonight, what do you advise people? I mean, I'll talk about what I advise. Morgan, you can talk about what you advise. Chris, what do you advise people when they want to get involved with the disincarnate? How do they protect themselves?
What I always did was I would go in confident. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I was there for. Paid my respects as I went in. I checked where I was around was mostly Eastern European and Pennsylvania Dutch people in the cemetery. So you just follow their customs as far as what they do with the dead. You make sure that you respect the people there. I always asked permission before I came in. If I walked up to somebody's place, I always asked them, same way before you walk into somebody's house. You always ask before you come in the front door. You have to be invited. You just can't go traipsing across somebody's resting place.
Right.
And when I left, I would always make sure that I left something behind, like a penny or some food or something that I was giving something back to the spirit that, okay, thank you for your time, thank you for helping me out. Some kind of respect. If you walk in with confidence and respect, I don't see where there's going to be a whole lot of problems.
Well, you always take the chance of there being that one disincarnate that's looking for a possession.
Sure, but then you have the other ones around you that also, if you have 10 that respect you and you have one asshole in the group, 9 times out of 10, the 10 are going to come up and say, wait a minute, you're not going to do this.
Right, that's true. They do monitor one another in that way, but sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes there is a disincarnate who is very interested in being in your physicality. One of the things that you have to protect yourself from when you leave a cemetery is to leave the disincarnate there. And I always, improve a grave that has been left. What I would consider a grave of an elder, someone who's either been dead for a long time or who died very old, improve its condition because they are very attached to where they were last in involvement with their family, and that the graveside is usually where they were last involved with their family. But you have to protect yourself generally across the board when you deal with the disincarnate. You have to take a position that you're not available for possession. It's very difficult when you teach this work or live this work to cubbyhole things. Like we want to talk about protection tonight, but we seem to be talking a lot about the disincarnate. And that's very interesting to me because a lot of people say they come to me and they say I need to be kept safe from this thing that's in my house or these people that are in my house or this energy that's coming towards me or this particular disincarnate. I have one client who is profoundly, and her word not mine, haunted by her father, and he just will not leave her alone. And then when I say, okay, I want to do this and this and this to break the tie, she freaks out and says, but he's my father. So there's all these kinds of crazy multiple levels going on there in terms of how can I possibly protect you if you don't want to be protected from this kind of thing. Morgan, regarding, you do a lot of work in the area of voodoo.
Yes.
How does protection, and now that we seem to be talking quite a bit about the disincarnate, how do you protect yourself from that disincarnate that wants to be in your physicality, that wants to take possession or take over a part of your life?
Well, there are a couple things I always recommend that people do. And the first one is, if you want to work with the disincarnate, or even if you don't want to work with the disincarnate but you want some extra level of protection, is to get in touch with your ancestors, those who you always had a good, strong relationship with in life. They don't always want to come back. They may be confused. They may have different reasons for not wanting to contact you. But we have in my tradition what's called a boveda, which is an altar table set up specifically for the dead, where I put pictures of the deceased. And it doesn't have to just be blood family. It can be, there's a young man on there who I was very close to who took his own life several years ago. He is counted among my ancestors because he crossed over before I did. And there's also a statue and some pictures of a couple people that I consider to be spiritual ancestors, like Marie Laveau. And every week I light a white candle there, and I put a glass of water for the way I learned to do it was to put a large glass of water with a little bit of anisette in it and pray, call their names, and ask them for protection and ask them to keep guiding me. And I always offer them blessings, too, and thank them for all the hard work that they have done to lay good foundations for my family and for my life. That's one of the best ways you can get protection against any of the other disincarnate, is to have good, strong relations with your ancestors. The other, in my tradition, is to get to know the spirits known as Degede, who are the spirits of the dead. Mm-hmm. They're semi in between what we would call saints, perhaps, or some higher evolved entity and an actual human spirit. And they often control the crossroads which allow the dead to come and go. And if you have a good relationship with, say, Mate Carathor, who's one of the spirits that decides which dead get to come back to Earth and which dead have to stay in the land of the dead, they can also close the door to prevent that aggressive entity from coming into your space and from harassing you.
You know, Morgan, it's very interesting to me because we have a very different language about what we do, and we do exactly the same thing. With me, it's all attending demons. I don't have the ancestral aspect in terms of my work. I understand it. It's just not the way that I work. And, you know, I'm Sicilian, and blood is blood in a Sicilian family, and it's powerful, and you have that connection. But I don't necessarily use ancestors in this way. For me, it is all in real time attending demons, and they are powerful and large and right in my face and really can't be missed. But I'm doing a similar thing, because what's happening is the way that I'm honoring them is to interact with them. Demons want chaos, they want energy, they see those two things as the same thing. So when they find someone like me who is involving myself in these sort of high-risk sorcery behaviors, because they are at this point in my work and in my career, they are invigorated by that. It's almost a sensual connection that they get to the chaos and to the energy that I'm around. So for me, that it's not so much the spirits and the divinities that you work with, but it's a similar kind of groundwork. It's a similar kind of crew, if you will, knowing that they have your safety and your wellness and your protection at heart. Do the ancestors, that the way that you work with your ancestors, do they protect others? Do they protect each other as disincarnate? Is there a second level?
Yeah, they do. They all seem to work together in concert to protect themselves, and certainly I know they've stepped in and intervened for members of my family, even when members of my family have not either asked me to do something or have not had not known that I was doing something until after the fact, and yet I know the intervention was there. So they can and will do that. It's not that they are demanding that only the people who work directly with them will get the benefit of that. They will do that, and sometimes they have done it on their own without my asking for their intervention. So, yeah, I think they will, and part of that is I think they're just in a different state of mind. They're willing to help other people if I ask them to intervene.
I see. See, for me, the attending demons, unless I send them to someone, they're all on me all the time. And, 9 gives me the sense that because energy is what it is, that they react to me in that way because that's what's necessary. I use them to protect my family. I use them to protect my friends and my students when they require protection, whether it's from weather or lunatics or oneself. They go and they sort of do the bidding that I ask them to do, and in that they get paid back by having an experience of touching the energy. Is there a wider, sort of more broad view when it comes to ancestors and the disincarnated? I mean, Chris, do you involve yourself with ancestor work? How does that work for you?
Well, the tradition that I learned, a lot of it is based on the Teutonic and Germanic pagan medicine and folklore. So there's a lot of ancestry based in there as far as working with them and everything. Now, I don't have an elaborate altar form and things like that, but I have certain ancestors that I do work with. The problem is in my mind, there's only certain ones that I would use in a case depends on what I'm working with. I couldn't, it goes back to what I said before about you can't talk to George Washington about an iPad. It all depends on who I'm working with and what I'm working with, if I can call that one up and use them. Now, as far as veneration goes, I do go through a couple periods where I do venerate my ancestors and I give thanks and, for what they set up for us and all that. Mm-hmm. But I like to rely mostly on myself and the spirits that I have around me that have my back long enough that I know I can count on them. I can't expect my Uncle Louie to know what he's doing when I have something going on with a spirit that's giving me a hard time. That wasn't his forte. I mean, he was Catholic. He wouldn't know some of the things that I do.
Right, sure.
And I wouldn't. It's just certain things that I couldn't have them do that I would be going up against.
A lot of times when clients talk to me, they say, I'm afraid I'm going to be killed. I'm afraid I'm going to face death in some way. Whether they're coming to you for protection that is from an outside source or protection from themselves. I mean, I've had clients who have suicidal tendencies and they come to me to help them either manage or suppress or face that in some way. So what they're dealing with is an interaction with death or their version of their fear about death. I say this all the time. I'm Sicilian. We had funerals, wakes in the house when I was growing up. And in all of our relatives' houses, people were laid out in their own homes. Embalming was done, and they were laid out in their own homes. So for us, death has been a partner in the experience from the beginning. It's like if you are friends with the biggest thug in the neighborhood, then that thug is not going to abuse you. Eventually, that thug might take you down in a moment, but that thug is not going to be somebody who's going to harass you on a day-to-day basis. So we have a relationship with death as people who are Sicilian. And, anyone who tells you that they're Sicilian and tells you that's not true is either not Sicilian or does not want to admit what it is like to grow up as a person in that culture. Death is around us all the time. My aunts had shrines to the disincarnate in their family, and I do mean shrines in their houses. Enormous, elaborate, well-lit stockpiles of candles and photos and all this business. So when people come to me and they have a fear of death, what I say to them is, let's deal with death. Let's get in bed with death, essentially. I have a creed, which I published in the first Blood Sorcery Bible, and I haven't talked about in a while, but I have a creed, an understanding, a relationship with death. I think when it comes to protection, one has to sometimes stare right at the face of the thing that they are the most afraid of, or the thing that they feel is perpetrating upon them. So I find it interesting that the three of us have a real relationship with death in this way. And having attending demons is kind of a reminder of that, because they cannot die per se. They can disenfranchise from their energy, from that thing which holds them together, but they don't really die. So in that sense, I I'm in a way in awe of them. They are vulnerable in other ways, but not in that particular way. So when people come to you and they say that they have a fear of dying, and that's caged in a lot of ways. Someone is scaring them. They're in a domestic abuse situation. They are high-risk lifestyles. They're all kinds of things. Do either of you develop as opposed to turn away from the relationship that the individual is coming to you with, develop that relationship with death as a method of protection? And I want to go down this path a little bit. Anybody?
What I generally tell people, I try to get them to think, like I said, this is going back to my ancestors and what I started when I first got into this. They were always taught, I mean, you never knew, you walk out your front door, you didn't know if you were coming back in that night. Okay? And their belief system was based on the fact that, yes, the gods are there, and yes, you know, they'll help them, but don't count on a whole lot. You know, because, like, especially the Norse, I mean, Odin was the chief god, the All-Father, and he was a one-eyed con man. You know, so how the hell are you going to trust something like that? And that's what the people were up against. I mean, they had the horrible winters and all that stuff, and I tried to instill that into people that I talk to. It's like, you aren't guaranteed anything. You're guaranteed that one day you're going to die. And today's just as good a day as any other day to do it. You know, so what the hell are you afraid of? You know, what exactly are you afraid of? And, you know, you'd be surprised that they're worried more about what's going to happen afterward than the event of them dying.
When you say afterward, do you mean in their, what they refer to,
right.
They use the term, I don't use it, afterlife, or what's going to be left behind alive?
No, it's pretty much, they're worried about, you know, are they going to go to heaven, or are they going to go to hell? It's like, it's pretty much, then your belief system sucks. Because if you're not strong enough to sit there and say, I know where I'm going to go when I die, then you've got a problem that you've got to figure out.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to come to the conclusion that you're okay with, you know, what's going to happen if you die. Because until you come to that conclusion, you're not going to get over this fear of dying.
You know, when people say to me, how could you function, especially around the dead all the time, and not have any divinity or deity structure in your life whatsoever? Because I just don't. And then that's just where it is for me. It's all science for me. And I say, people say, aren't you worried about heaven and hell? And I say, well, I've spoken to more disincarnate people than living people, I think, at this point, and they tell me that that's not how it works. For me, it's all very experiential. They tell me that you go on to do more of yourself and you evolve into this sort of other place, and some choose to continue to communicate with the living and some don't. And some are sad and broken by their exchange out of here and some are not. And it seems to be just, you know, another level of living, except not living physically in the way that we think of living. So, for me, protection from death seems ridiculous. It's protection from the sadness of what one goes through in the social context, yes, of course. Protection from pain, perhaps. Protection from fear. Protection from discomfort in a life that might have somebody impinging upon the way that you work or live your life. But the relationship with death, I think, is the ultimate protection, because you can't live in fear of that with which you already have a relationship. Morgan, do you want to talk about anything that's going on in the chat room right now?
Right now, well, there's a lot of activity, and people are talking about going to cemeteries and hanging out there. And we have one who said that she learned to get over her fear of water by learning how to do offshore passage making, and is learning to overcome fear of death by volunteering at hospices. So I think that's one of the best ways to do it, is to familiarize yourself with it. When I grew up, it was not considered a scary experience, although we didn't have the direct experiences such as you had with having wakes in people's homes. We did that in funeral homes. There always seemed to be, when I had an older relative die, things were very nicely done. There were a lot of flowers, and even the cemeteries where I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, the cemeteries are beautiful there. They're old cemeteries, they're well maintained, and there's a lot of monuments there that go back to the Victorian times. So in that sense, I always felt very at peace in places like cemeteries. And I think that helped me early on not really be afraid of death, because it was never presented to me growing up as anything to be scared of. So the actual event itself of death was not something for me to be frightened of. And I think that what this one listener is talking about doing by working at hospices is what sometimes all of us do. The three of us work with people who are passing over in various stages, and that's another way of familiarizing yourself with death. It's a part of life, and there's no sense in being afraid of it because we're all going to be there one day.
Well, I'll go as far as to say we're all there now. And when I say that, people say, well, what does that mean? And, once again, you cannot cubbyhole the work. You can't talk about one part of this without talking about another part of that. And maybe because I feel like I've had a profound relationship with death my entire life. And my choices, of course, I was a trade embalmer. I worked for the medical examiner's office. I've seen more disincarnate in their bodies, come out of their bodies, than most people could even imagine. So I have really, truly lived my entire life in service to the disincarnate in a profound way. So that doesn't change. It goes on and on. However, I don't really see a great chasm between where they are and where we are. Even when I hear myself use the language of they and we, I'm still even uncomfortable with that, because my life is so rich with the disincarnate that it feels to me absurd to sort of segregate out the living from the dead in that way. And for me, protection is complete immersion. If you go to another country and you can't speak the language, you need protection of some kind, whether the protection is a translator, or the protection is living a very sort of narrow existence and just doing the things that you know how to do, whether the protection is carrying a little book around and trying to, find the words in that little book to say. You do need that kind of thing. And I use that example, even though that doesn't sound like protection, it really is, because it's an opportunity to combat confusion or discomfort. So in that sense, it's protection. When it comes to death, it's the same thing. You have to have an interpreter. You have to have a way to translate. You have to have a way to communicate with the experience of death. And people say, what is death? Is it the Grim Reaper? Well, no, it's not. It's an essence. It's an entity in and of itself that continues to feed itself by involving itself in life and changing that energy from live energy to an energy it can utilize in the experience of death when the vessel is not working any longer, and we are now in a position to be without the vessel and to be continuing. And this is the greatest protection one can give themselves, is full immersion in the understanding of the work. We talk about blood sorcery, we talk about the iron ring, we talk about directional sorcery, all this kind of stuff. People come to me and they say, I need protection. Can you throw some protection on me? And they're often very surprised that the first thing I want to do is this very intense interview of what it is that they're afraid of. Because really what protection is getting a grip, a knowledgeable ability to converse with the very thing that is antagonizing you. And I don't mean go have a meeting with the perpetrator and sit down, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying having a relationship with the activity of being pushed into a corner or feeling harassed or feeling, that there's somebody out there that you need protection from. And I have clients who need big protection. I have clients who have been in the witness protection program. I have clients who have said the wrong thing about the wrong person, and they're going to spend the rest of their life in hiding if we don't get this work done. So I have clients for whom protection is a very visceral, physical thing in real time. Those people, it would be ridiculous to try to protect them from 65 people who are after them. So what do? How is protection handled in a case like that? My desire is to move into the part of the conversation where we talk about being a protected person as opposed to a person who needs protection. And I'm curious as to what both of you think that might mean, because I want to talk about that, and then I want to send out some energy in that area. So if you are a person who is a protected person in the knowledge of the work, what does that mean to both of you?
Well, to me, it means somebody who lives it, who doesn't wait until something is ready to happen. And that's what I'm always getting from people who come to me. They wait until something has happened. And I try to drive home to them, my perspective is that you need to be working on protection every day. You don't just do it when the situation arises, because that's when you run into trouble and you're caught off guard and something else gets in under what little protection you do have. So I work with them and help them do this, and there are different ways for different people. So I try to accommodate the person and their individual beliefs. For me, it means maintaining a strong awareness of who I am, where I am at all times, maintaining my intent to keep myself shielded and protected from harm, and also to keep very good relationships with all the entities I work with. I mentioned the ancestors before. I also have protective entities, which now I am transitioning into calling attending demons, because they are exactly the same thing, and they fill that role in my life. So I make sure I have those relationships in order to, as well as with the various spirits that I work with that take on protective functions, such as Azili Danto, who is a very powerful protector. That's one of the biggest things. But even if you don't have a belief system that involves higher beings like Loa or deities or anything like that, you can still be very aware of your surroundings, and you can still take various precautions. We did a show on talismans a couple of weeks ago, even having a talisman dedicated specifically for protection. And I think it usually works if you have a couple, because if you lose one and you're so used to using and relying on this one, well, then it's become a crutch. So always have a backup that you keep your energy with. And those are just very simple, common sense things to do. Don't wait until something happens. Always be in other words, just be on the offensive. Don't be on the defensive. Be on the offensive.
Well, for me, the technical skill of clipping would handle that talisman issue, and that's something I think we're going to talk about in another show. And I haven't even talked about it much in class yet, but it's where you have an image of that talisman, so in a specific way in your mind that it is then tangible again. And I think that's a useful thing to do with a lot of the materials that we use in this work, because we're doing sorcery in real time. So therefore, you need to have an understanding of how to pull that thing out of the air. Chris, did you have any thoughts on this? Because I want to, after this conversation, I want to talk about doing a protection ritual tonight.
Sure. Just like what you just said about having it in your mind ahead of time without relying on... I'm not leaving the house with 15 things in my goddamn pocket. I got to carry enough between my keys, my wallet, everything. I don't have time for that other shit.
Yeah.
If I can't do it myself, then it don't get done. That's how I look at everything. I have my entities that protect me, but I don't rely on them 100%. I know they're there. I know they're there if I need them, but I'm not one to throw my power onto something else. If I let them take care of things, then that's kind of taking it away from me. And in my mind, it's no different than if, it's like the old thing, Jesus has the steering wheel. Well, bullshit, because all that's going to do is run me into a bridge. I don't give up the control to something else. It's like, I'll drive the car. You want to work the brake?
Then
fine.
How do you deal
I'll
with
drive the car.
Then how do you deal with enriching your relationship with your protector? Because I know that you have someone over you who protects you. So how do you, when does she kick in? How do you divide the work?
I use her, I shouldn't say use. I implore her to do things for me as far as, if I'm going someplace, if I'm going in town, I use her more as an early warning device than what I do something else, than as the reactionary. She's the voice in my ear that goes duck, or watch this, glasses. Then it's like, okay, there's somebody that's glasses. Something's wrong here. If I, something as stupid as I can't find my car keys, I'll get something in my ear that says sofa. That's where I employ her to do. I don't like to put something on them that I, like I said, where I'm giving up my control over myself. You want to watch my back, fine, but as far as combating something, let me do it. If I need help, I'll ask. But up until that point, let me take care of everything else. You want to play backseat driver, okay, I can let you do that. Or you want to sit next to me and tell me when to brake, and fine, that's okay. But I don't want to give up total control to something. I grew up, well, you did the same thing in the Catholic Church. I ain't doing that again.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
No,
that's
absolutely.
Too much.
Absolutely.
And so that's where my mindset is. Like I said, I walked around with a St. Christopher medal and a crucifix for 18 years. I don't need that shit now. I wear something if I want to wear it, if I think it's nice. It isn't because it means, if I wear this, my nuts won't fall off. I don't have time to wear all the shit that's supposed to protect me. I don't have time. That's just too
specific.
much.
When I was very young, my attending demons presented themselves as two large black dogs, and I've talked about this before. And not until I was a little older, 5, 6, did I realize that we never fed them, because I just assumed everyone saw them. And then I realized that there was some kind of difference between my dogs and other dogs, and a realization took over. But the thing that I found interesting with them was that they would protect me from when my parents were violent and angry. They would protect me from the sister I have who was extraordinarily abusive to me from the moment I was born. They had no sense of other people in the house being okay because they were there. They had a very high frequency. It turns out now that one of the dogs was 9 and the other one was 7, and that the other attending demons were there but not present in that way. And it's too complex of a story to tell in this little bit of time that we have left on the radio. But my relationship with them was very pure, and yet always still a negotiation. Even at that young age, I found myself, like you're saying, very involved in the discussion of what we were doing. It was rare that, in the way that dogs protect a person by sometimes jumping up and doing what they need to do, aside from that, it was more of an intellectual thing that happened between us. Like they would consult with me and ask me if I felt unsafe or scared or worried in this way. And so my relationship with my protectors has always been quite profound in that way. And I think that when people hear these stories, they are always surprised that, and they're hearing my story and both of your stories about the people who are around you that protect you, or the individuals, the entities, if you will. It's not a glamorous thing. It's not like, something is swooping down to stand between you and the next guy with their sword in their hand. It is a negotiation that we make. It is an understanding of what it means to be a protected person. Because I really do feel that the three of us are protected people. We also have something that very few people have, is we have a group of individuals studying and doing this work. We have each other in our lives to rely on, and that's new to a lot of people. About 5 years ago, I was the last extraordinarily obnoxious encounter I had with someone who was demanding that I cease immediately teaching the information or sharing the information or writing about the information. How dare I not keep all of this secret? And, I always sort of blow that off. That doesn't mean anything to me, but there are many people who feel that way. And as we grow in the work of sorcery, one of the greatest assets that we have is one another in the practice. of the work. And that's an unusual thing. I mean, people have all sorts of paths that have groups and covens and whatever it is that they call themselves. That's not what this is. There's no membership here. There's no, no black belt in the work. There's no initiation. Anyone who comes to my work, I teach them, I share with them what I know, and they do what they want to do with it. There's never, you don't have to come and spend 5 hours to become initiated. None of those things happen. And I respect that other groups do that and other paths do that, but that is not, to me, the way it works, because I have no more of a right to this work than anybody else does. So I add that because it again is protection by knowledge, protection by not having all of these boundaries and these weird things between yourself and your right to be safe, your right to practice, your right to be in the work, this sort of total immersion thing. So we have, none of that, but we do certainly have one another. And when I was dealing with the stuff from the exorcism, this group was all over me. Everybody was participating and calling and texting, and we pulled it all back together in a way that, of course, my doctors are startled by, but that's nothing new. So it's a unique situation to have this kind of like rapid response team. Thoughts on that before I go into the protection ritual? Anybody?
Well, it's always good to have backup, and that's one thing that I think anybody who gets into this work, I know there's been a lot of emphasis, especially in the New Agey sector, about solitary practitioners in recent years, and a lot of us still have that image of the old wizard or the old witch who lives alone in some creepy, spooky castle that has all this infinite knowledge and is your go-to person, but they never seem to have anyone around them. I think that's just another layer of protection, is that we talk about things on the level of energy, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with having people there to get your back too. And so much the better if they are working with the same sorts of energies, or at least have a working knowledge of how to use energy manipulation. But I'll tell you what, when it comes down to it, if I've had a really rough day, the first person I call is one of my best friends, to talk about it, to get some support. And they don't they're not into it at all. One is a Baptist, one is an atheist, and I'll talk to one of them about it, and they always give me the support I need. Sometimes that's all I need.
But when we need sorcery, we go to each other.
Yes.
And that's what we do, and that's what I find very interesting. When we're not saying I'll throw you some good energy. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we have a construct of the way things are done. We are all trained in it, and we have a relationship with a set of language for the work. If someone says to me that they have to go and work a job at night in a scary neighborhood, because that recently happened with one of the students, and they said to me, how do we work this thing? How do I remain safe? And I say, well, I will create your iron ring for you, and you will take the safety of being in your home to work with you, and therefore nothing will happen to you. This is another kind of protection that we didn't even really get a chance to talk about tonight. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about and sending, if you will, I don't really like that word too much, but activating some protection for our listeners. And I suggested that people get a mirror if they have one. And the reason that I suggested people get a mirror is not because I want you to stare at yourself endlessly during this process, but at least have an understanding of where the energy is between where it leaves your eyes and lands on something and has a reflection that comes back to you. A lot of the time in teaching, what we talk about is these very narrow margins of energy, the outside of the iron ring, the line in the center of the static practice, what happens when you reach across the chaos void. All of these images of putting one's hands or oneself through a wall of energy or coming away from a wall of energy where there is a place of neutrality. Can there be neutrality? Well, quantum physics tells us that there cannot be, that there are some thoughts about what a vacuum is, but even inside the vacuum, as proven in the Casimir effect, things join up and show up and then come apart and appear not to be there. But to have joined up and shown up, there has to have been something there to begin with. So there is no vacuum. There is no place without anything. How could there be? It's essentially an arrogant state of mind to think that there can be a nothing. But we use the language of nothingness, of a void, of an empty space, because all voids fill themselves. So when we talk about protection, what I suggest we do is an interesting kind of turn on the thing in a way that one may not have heard it before. People who work with me and do and study with me and that sort of thing have heard it before, but other listeners might not have heard it before. When we think about protection, we think about covering ourselves with blankets, keeping ourselves safe, making ourselves invisible, pulling ourselves away and not be seen, and have a nice corner to hide in or be protected in, and that's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is the opposite. What we're going to do is talk about the same kind of thing we talk about when we discuss invisibility. We're going to talk about being so large that you cannot be hurt. And how does this happen? Well, when you look at yourself in the mirror, what's happening? There is clearly an energy that comes from you to an image of you and back to you. And rarely does one think about that area of energy bouncing from your looking out of your eye to the mirror that you're looking in or the reflective surface that you're looking in, and that image being read again by your mind's eye. You're having a trigger to the reaction of seeing yourself. If you are seeking protection, if you're seeking the desire to have protection, or you're seeking to utilize your own ability to do sorcery in protection, then I will now show you how to utilize that space between where energy leaves your eye, sees a reflection of yourself, and comes back to you in your mind's eye. In that space is a profound amount of energy, and that is what we're going to use for protection tonight. For those of you who don't feel that you want to do this work yourself and feel that you want to utilize my energy or my output, if you will, for protection, then perceive an image that means something to you about me in the mirror and allow that to happen during this procedure. And what we're going to do is I'm going to stand in this moment and be clear in this moment and have this presence of ourselves looking into a mirror. And here is where I'm going to now drop into the energy and start the work. So just have a listen, just be in the energy. The outcome tonight is that I will produce an energy that one can grasp and hold on to and use as a protective device. What's a protective device? That which stands between oneself and harm in a moment of necessity in real time. When I present this energy as I'm starting to do now, you'll feel pressure against yourself. You might feel pressure against your face, against your eyes, against your chest. You might right now feel an energy of something poking you in the sternum. This is an awakening of that spot. This is not a chakra issue by any means. I don't know anything about that. This is about me placing my energy in front of you for you to be able to feel it and have a tangible interaction with it, which is what I'm doing right now. As this happens, you might feel a need to stand up. You might feel a need to remain extraordinarily vertical or to sit up in a way where you feel this protection or this energy sitting against the front of you, almost as if one is told to sit up and look into the darkness or look into a blank area. Except in this case, you are forced to look into some reflective device. When you do this, there's an automatic exchange of energy. I am putting my energy in the space between your eye and the mirror, in that space, and I am sending it, I am allowing it out now. And here it is. And as I allow it out now, what happens is you can now be present in this force pushing against you, and which you can push back on. Once you can feel it, put your hands up in it, touch it. Once you can feel it, what you're feeling is an automatic version of a wall of an iron ring. Those of you who have done the iron ring before know what it feels like. Those of you who don't, now you know what it feels like. You're pushing your hand through this space, through this energy right in front of you. And this is my energy of protection dispersed so that it lands in the energy area of those of you who are participating. You can do it now, you can do it in archive, it doesn't matter. And you'll be able to push your hand through it and feel it. You'll be able to feel a density. And this is the basic toolkit for protection. And when you breathe, when you put your mouth into the space and breathe it in, you'll be feeling a density even in the air that you pull into your lungs. You'll be feeling a heaviness, but not a heaviness in an uncomfortable way, but a heaviness in the fact that we're feeling the presence of the energy that we're breathing in. And that one is 100% involved in feeling this block of energy. So I ask you to take it and to bring it into yourself and to bring it around yourself and to close it around yourself. The reflection into the mirror is no longer necessary because now you've built this partition, this density, this wall of energy around you. You've not summoned it. You have not had to accrue it. It's there. All I did was enact it. All I did was enrich it and label it and therefore making it tangible. And once you pull it around yourself, you are living in a moment of understanding what it feels to be inside that which you've created or grasped a hold of. And this is what protection is. And you'll feel it. You'll feel it coming down around you. You'll feel it taking its presence around you. But here's the thing. It's not going to go away. What it's going to do now is make itself available to you ongoing so that when you need protection, you can have the trigger of this moment and pull yourself back into this place. You can use this to protect yourself from others. You can use this to protect yourself from your own fear of being damaged or incurring any kind of interaction as discomfort. You can use this moment of this trigger of this energy to stop yourself from your own behavior that will cause you complex difficulties in the future. When you close your eyes and you're in this experience, it is common, and the data tells me it's common because an enormous amount of people have told me that they have this experience, that what they see is a blue, almost sparkly sort of surface. This is the energy hitting back and forth on the mechanism of your eyes. This is not a color chart. This is not colors don't mean anything. It's none of those things. It is a simple automatic response from your body that allows, when you close your eyes in this energy, some sort of molecular experience where the internal experience of looking at the back of your own eyelids causes some sort of blue hue. This is usually an indicator that you have taken the energy and you've manipulated it around yourself and you've wrapped it yourself in it. And, there's no special breathing here. This is not a relaxation technique. This is not a meditation. This is a transfer of energy. When we as sorcerers use the energy around us, we don't gather it. We don't garner it. We don't call it upon ourselves. We touch it and change its density. We bunch it up around ourselves. This is protection. And what this does is it allows for the energy that you have to remain contained within, as opposed to worrying so much about being distorted in any way or having a deflection issue. You're contained inside of this energy, and therefore whatever hits it only enhances it. This is why I started with a mirror, and now we're talking about reflectivity. Reflectivity being the kind of sorcery where you have such a powerful, dense energy packed around you that now anything that touches it feeds it. Think about that. I'll say that again. Now anything that touches that energy, be it that which comes to you to give you joy or give you harm, only enhances the energy around you, the density of the wall of this iron ring. And this is something that is not usually looked at this way, but it's a way that has the truth of quantum physics. Where there is energy and more energy touches it, there is more energy. Energy works best against resistance. The denser this energy is around you, the more something touches it, the more it feeds it, makes it denser and denser and denser. And now at this point, 7 minutes or so into this experience, or even longer than that we've been doing this, you'll start to feel free in it, less oppressed by it and free in it. And that it is sort of an overall glove on you, in a sense, something which is surrounding you and yet comes from you and to you. A sense that you move it and it moves you and you are in control of it. We will not be dissipating it because now you have it and you can use it whenever you want it. You start to become comfortable in it and know that in this kind of protection, like I said before, anything that touches it enhances it. It's now your choice how to use it. Sometimes when you do this work, you'll start to feel a pressure or sensitivity around your eyes, like in the frontal lobe of your brain and your frontal bone. You'll feel a heaviness there. If that happens, stand up in it, move in it. What's happening is that the density of the energy around you is pushing down on you. I ask that you step up into it and utilize it. And I'll just stay in that and let it grow and learn to manipulate it and feel it and use it as you see fit. Once you learn how to do this, and now you have it, it's on you if you want to use it, you can then learn to manipulate it and share this energy going forward with others who require this kind of protection. 10 minutes ago, the mirror was a tool. Now the mirror is part of the experience. 10 minutes ago, we used the mirror to jump off the initial launching of the energy, to bounce it back and forth, to give it speed, to give it legs. And now the reflectivity is the entire experience of the encasement of the energy. And with that, I'll take a moment to just give everybody a second to be in it and just relax in it. And I am sure there'll be feedback from this because there always is. And this is not the kind of magic per se that involves us to, any kind of ritual to take it down or any kind of spirituality around it. You just change the physical exchange that you're having with the energy around you. So I'll leave it at that. Morgan, Chris, any thoughts?
Well, I definitely, especially towards the end, was feeling the pressure you were talking about. It started for me on my temples, both simultaneously, and then it kind of moved around my brow bone and a little bit under my eyes. So the feeling that I'm getting is just something that is kind of enveloping in a good way, but not in a smothering way. And I try to get into the exercise as much as possible, but retain a little bit of my mind to consciously process it. And I really was appreciative of the fact that you mentioned that this is energy that will continue to be fed from other energies that we come into contact with, because that's something that so many people don't take into account. It's like when you set a protection like this in place, well, where does the energy come from? And this is a great workaround for it, because you're not continually dumping your own energy into it. You're relying on the energy that's around you.
Right, and that is what we do in sorcery, is look at what's available and utilize it. We're not calling energy from elsewhere, because we are energy. This goes back to, if I'm doing sorcery on somebody who's sitting next to me, or somebody who's 10,000 miles away from me, or 1,000 miles away from me, there's no difference, because the energy is just simply moving in that direction, and that's where it needs to go. Chris, do you have any thoughts before we do a round of how to find us?
I was thinking of this as more or less like using an ambient energy source, like everything that's around you, which I prefer to do that. That's just my thing. That's how I learned, and that's what I do. I pull in, if I'm putting up something around myself, I use what's available so that it's not taxing on me.
Right. That's
like
exactly
said,
right.
With the reflection, that's how it should be set up. That if it would fire at you, it should have something that reflects it back, or at least glances it away from you that you don't get hit.
Well, it's all about making sure that we remember that we are in the energy. We therefore don't have to access the energy. We just have to push it around and and change it a little bit, it's as if everything around us is clay. We just grab it and form it into what it is that we want to grab it and form it into. We're not required to carry extra energy. We're not required to do anything outside of the norm of this manner of sorcery, which is really just about moving around that which already exists.
I
Morgan,
always told people.
Go ahead.
If I'm teaching somebody and they're having a really hard time at grasping this, I always tell them it's like, think of energy that you're putting around yourself as a suit of armor. It's a self-contained unit. You don't have to do anything. You move with it. You don't have to reinforce the metal. The metal is already there, and it will take care of itself.
Well, that's what the iron ring is. That's what the iron ring is, and it's but the language of it is very important, because when people think about armor, they think about something being heavy, them being encased inside and not being able to touch the outside world. And that's the difference, is that this is a completely transparent and yet valuably dense energy experience. Morgan, did you say something about distortion?
Yeah, at the very end of the work you were doing, it sounded as if your voice was getting a little distorted. Now, this may have simply been on my end, so I don't know whether any of the listeners heard it, but it sounded as if there was some sort of interference, like there was energy and your voice became distorted, more metallic, and I don't want to say mechanical, but a little bit like that, as it sometimes happens when you have satellite breakup. And it was just right at the end. It was almost as if the energy was surrounding you and it was a final push out from you. That may have been it, or like I said, it may have just been a technical issue on my end. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Let's listen to it in archive. I always find these things interesting, because when I work with clients and I do this kind of work, I hear this often, that my voice starts to sound robotic. That's the word people often use, or like an automated kind of voice. So let's listen to it in archive and see if we can hear it. This has been an incredible show tonight, and it's exciting to me because the other times that I've done these on-air things, there's been an enormous amount of feedback, and people have really benefited from these experiences. This is the work that we do. This is the work that I teach. This is the work that we study together in Wednesday night classes, and those people who are doing things privately with me. If you are a listener and you're interested in studying, you should contact me and we'll talk about it. Not everybody who calls me or contacts me winds up a student. I'm very careful about that sort of thing. We have a Wednesday night core group that I teach every Wednesday night, and what we get from that is tremendous amongst ourselves, back and forth, through the knowledge that I have and through the wonderful questions that students ask, and how it all feeds back and develops itself. So if you're interested in studying with me, please go ahead and communicate that to me, and maybe that will happen. It may or may not happen, but we could talk about it. Let's talk about how to find us. You want to go ahead and start, Morgan?
Yes, you can find me at morgansaintknight@hotmail.com. It's all one word, and there is no period after the saint part, just morgansaintknight@hotmail.com. Morgan,
remind us about the book, please.
Oh, yes. I've written a book called Curse of Prometheus, and you can find that on Amazon right now, and you can also find my website, talesofmedea.com, and you can contact me through that as well.
And also the URL for the show. Go ahead.
Yes, it's darkmattersradiocagliastro.com, all one word. And I know that's a lot for people to process, so if you look close to the top of the Blog Talk Radio page where we have the little summary, there is a link to it right there. It's in the very last line. It's darkmattersradiocagliastro.com.
I really would love everyone to read the book. It's brilliant. It's rich. It's extraordinary. I can't say enough about your book, Morgan.
Well, thank you, Sorceress. I appreciate that.
It's really quite. It's an important read. Chris, you want to talk about how to find you?
Yes, you can find me on email at hellsrogue, all one word, HELS hellsrogue@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Hells Rogue on Facebook.
And you're also on the Dark Matters radio show
Yes.
Website. We all are. Chris, I've said this to you before, and I can't stop saying it to you. I'm so grateful for our friendship and for the fact that you jumped in and got involved in this show. I'm grateful to both of you. You have an extraordinary rich history and so much to add, and it's just so wonderful having this group because we come from 3 different places with the same sense of purpose, which is brilliant. So thank you for that. I can be reached a number of ways. I'm Sorceress Cagliastro at gmail.com. I can be reached at the Dark Matters radio show. If you Google me, there's 1,000 things that come up that tell you how to find me. I'm pretty easy to find. The books are all on Amazon. There's 13 books on Amazon. 5 of them are specifically directed to the kind of sorcery that we're talking about doing here at this time. People ask me the same question all the time, where do I start if I want to read your books? Start with the Blood Sorcery Bible Volume 2. I say that because it is the less visceral and the more high frequency of the 2. It is a broader view of the work and a good place to start. So that is what I suggest if you're interested in the books. If you're interested in studying with me, then there is on my website, which is cagliastrotheironring.com, is a tab for Wednesday night classes. Go ahead and read that. But I do suggest if anyone wants to study with me or have a consultation or a reading or have me be involved in necromancy with them, an email is the way to go. I don't do everything that I'm asked to do. I don't involve myself with every client who comes to my door. I'm very specific about the work I will and will not do. And it might be a broader spectrum than you think it is, but I still, contacting is not a yes. Contacting is an opportunity to talk about whether or not there's something for us to do together. The best way to do that is at sorceresscagliastro@gmail.com. I cannot keep it more simple than that. This is the Dark Matters radio show with the Sorceress Cagliastro. I want to thank Victor for coming in tonight, Morgan St. Knight, our producer and science officer, and my esteemed co-host, Chris Rogue Ostrowski. And I look forward to the feedback from tonight's show and very interested in hearing what people were experiencing during the live sorcery in real time tonight, which for tonight's subject was protection. Thank you very much, and I look forward to next week, and we will soon tell you what the subject matter is next week. Thank you, and good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.